One of the reasons that people are held back when they want to have a relationship with the Holy Spirit is it starts as a hindrance. The way that the Bible uses impersonal metaphors to talk about a personal being, right? You read the Bible and the Spirit is spoken of as a wind, as a dove, as a fire. And how do you have a relationship with that, we wonder? We know from our doctrine that the Spirit is not an impersonal force. He is not an it. But how do you begin to pierce through those metaphors into the mystery that's beyond them in a way that's not just filling up your head with the right belief about the Spirit, which is very important, there's no question. But how do you capture the fire of Pentecost? The first step is to begin to understand that God has given us those metaphors for himself as a gift. Every single one of them. The Spirit as water, as oil, as wind, as fire, as a dove. Each of them says something poetically about God that no other image quite could. And we have to start at a place of faith. We have to start at a place of belief that when the Holy Spirit revealed himself as those things, when Jesus sitting with Nicodemus in a dark night, when this teacher of Israel came to the great teacher of Israel and said, what's going on here? Paraphrasing. Jesus said, the Spirit's like wind. Blows where he wants to. Every metaphor for the Holy Spirit is a doorway. Every metaphor for the Holy Spirit. And every one of them opens up some way of thinking about him and knowing him in a way that no other image can. Fire. Let's start with fire. On the day of Pentecost, when most Christian theologians believe that the church began. There's this group of people, Jesus' family, his community, gathered at this room in Jerusalem. And Jesus, before he ascended to the Father, turned to this group of people and he said, don't do anything. He had already given them the Great Commission, the go and make disciples instructions that Jesus did. He had done that. He said, don't do anything. Don't do even the going that I tell you until the Holy Spirit comes, until you have power from on high, one translation says. So the community went and they sat until the day of Pentecost. Pentecost is a harvest feast. They commemorate the giving of the law, but it's also a feast of ingathering, when all the crops are brought together and they rejoice and they celebrate in this agricultural community. We've brought in the harvest. And from all over the Roman world, Jews and people who had been converted to the Jewish faith had gathered in Jerusalem just like a harvest. People from Europe, people from Africa, people from near Asia, all of them speaking different languages, all of them united by one thing. They're here to worship, they're here to celebrate. And it's at that moment, 7 weeks after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, that community of people sitting in a little room in Jerusalem saw fire, flames of fire, appear. And they began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance, says one translation. And in that moment, God's fire fell upon his church. And he consecrated his temple, his spiritual temple, the church. Think for a moment with me about what fire is in the Bible. Think back to what Moses saw when he received his call, as a bush burned and was not consumed on Sinai. Think when the law was given. God descended in a cloud and there was lightning and storms and thunder and fire on the top of the mountain. Think about Elijah in a showdown with the prophets of Baal. One of the darkest moments in Israel's history. What does he do? He says, let the God that gives fire be the one worshipped by the people. And he builds an altar and he piles wood on it and he puts a piece of beef on top and he pours water 3 times over it all. just to be sure that when the fire fell, it was the real deal. What does God do? He answers through fire. Think about Isaiah in the moment of his call, standing in the temple in the year King Uzziah died, and the train of God, the trailing glory of God filled the temple. And he says, "Woe to me, a man of unclean lips," because he knew he had looked upon that which was not lightly looked upon. What happens? An angel, a messenger of God, comes, and he takes the service instruments of the temple, a pair of tongs, and he picks up a burning coal from the altar, and he touches it to the prophet's lips, and cleanses his lips. We could go on and on and on and on, just in that one image, that one doorway to the life of the Spirit, that is the image of fire as used in the Bible. And by the time we get to Luke's telling of the story in Pentecost, and the fire shows up, we see what the church is. They're a sacrifice, and they're a prophet. They're at a moment of crisis. They're at a moment of calling. The harvest festival is lit on fire, like a bush that burns, and yet is not consumed. How do we miss this? How do we miss these mysteries? How do we waltz through sermons and all of the good aspects of study? How do we read our Bibles and not get captured by the mystery? I don't know, but I want that. I think we're onto something when we begin to see those images for the Spirit as doorways into something that's just so meaningful and so beautiful. I think we're onto something.